the 90 or now less so minutes of you learning about Virginia Satir, who was the mother of family therapy and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and why is she a mother or even a grandmother of NLP? Because Virginia was one of the prime 3 models of creating NLP. So Richard Bandler and John Grinder, if you have studied with them, they very generously share this, that Virginia was one of the 3 models, together with Fritz Perls, that they modeled and created NLP from. Fritz Perls, Gestalt therapy, Milton Erickson, hypnosis, and Virginia Satir, family therapy. Virginia Satir was one of the 3 people who Richard and John interviewed, modeled, and they created NLP. When they wrote this book, can you see the magic, the structure of magic? Grinder and Bandler, they wrote this book based on how Virginia did communication and why was she so prominent for them to create NLP. Well, as I said, this is not just a lecture. You can learn so much from books without me. You can read all these amazing books that I will share with you, but the value of today's session is to be interactive. I want you to experience things. So that's why I would love us to stay engaged, connected. If you can turn your video on, that would be fantastic for me to see you all. And we're together in this experience, everybody influencing everybody. So if you have a question, you can park it in the chat box. Whenever I go to see it, I will read it, or somebody like Celita and Stefania, you can just raise your hand and read them back to me, because currently when I present, I don't see the chat. But I would love everybody to use this functionality as we go through. So if and whenever you have a question, please write it down in the chat box. Great? Agree? Can I see a show of thumbs up? Agree, agree, agree? No questions so far? Everybody's on the same page? Thank you. Amazing. So what are my intentions for this session today is to really share the latest advancements in research. I've just finished my doctorate and I specialize on Virginia Satir. So I got some really hot off the press news about the Satir model. I would love to engage you with the Satir model, because I'm sure part of it you know, but part of it you have no clue how NLP was created. So this is a great opportunity for us to have this dialogue and lots of connection. I'm very approachable, so please treat me like a friend, a person who can share, and I would love to share as much as I can. So let's start from the very beginning. I'll tell you a little bit about the Satir model first, why it's so amazing, and then we can talk and discuss a bit about Virginia herself as a person. So first of all, Satir model is systemic, meaning it's not just about the person, it's also about the system that comes with the person. Experiential, so through the body. Humanistic, kind of Rogers and Satir, they were very much human-centric. Approach to transformation developed by Virginia Satir, often referred as the mother of family therapy. Okay, so core principles of Satir model. I love this because this is how I started. When I first worked in the corporate world, I was very, very busy helping American corporation create profit. It was really empty, and I was longing for something deeper. I wanted to connect with humans, so I went from marketing to HR. HR was more towards humans, but still not so much. I come from Siberia, and deep connections matter to me. And I always believed, I always wanted to become a psychologist, but up until recently, I was doing something else in my life. And when I heard at one NLP training something about Virginia Satir, it was like the penny dropped. It was like this connection. Oh, there's a woman in a field of men. There's a woman who was not just talking, but using her body. She was big. She was, big bosom, very charismatic woman with German origin in America, connecting people and helping them raise their self-esteem. The main concept and the main principle of Satir model is how do we help every person raise their self-esteem and let them be congruent. Congruent meaning authentic communication, where our thoughts, our words, our actions, and also our spirituality are aligned, that we connect to the core of who we are. Another principle is systemic awareness. So individuals are not just taken out of context. We look at a person as like a tip of the iceberg of the whole family system. You know, in Russia, the word for family is called semya, means 7 eyes. So 7 generations. In India, I know there are 7 generations of karma, dharma that you look into when you look at the patterns that travel through your generation, transgenerational, intergenerational patterns. Virginia was ahead of her time when she looked at that systemic awareness of a person. It's not like they come and, you know, we just look at them nonverbal, verbal, that's it. No, we look at what that person brings in. Their family, their context, their system where they grew up in. So I love that part of, you know, the first training from NLP into Satir. I went and I met this woman called Maria Gomori. She was a student of Virginia Satir. Virginia Satir died in 1988. Her last training was in Russia, in Soviet Union. And Maria Gomori, at the time when I met her, was 92 years old. A lady from Hungary who lived in Canada and traveled to Germany, a city called Cologne. And she had a workshop called the Family Reconstruction. And I was like, what is this? I was in Geneva at that time, had my first baby. My sister Paulina was with us. And we traveled with my husband and the baby and my sister to that training for 4 days. And I was amazed at this 92-year-old woman working from 9 till 5 and then drinking wine with us in the evening, telling stories about Virginia. I was like, Maria, where do you get the energy to do this work? And she said to me, I don't treat it as work. I treat it as my life. And my mission and principle of life is that I believe if we touch lives of 8% of people on this planet, the whole planet will change for the better. And I will die and live up until I die on doing this mission to reach that 8%. And I was like, what is this woman? If she could change her career at 50 when she left Hungary to go to Canada, at 70 years old when she met Virginia Satir, and for 20 years followed her around the world, I was at that 30 at that time. I could change my profession. So I moved from the corporate world into learning about Virginia Satir, and then later on became the director and founder of her institute in the UK. And now I love teaching and bringing awareness to her work because it's transformational. It's absolutely the best. So if you're listening to this, I would love you to pick one principle that you connect to from this list and just become curious how you can explore more of it. So then it's growth orientation. Virginia was all about creating growth context, opportunities for every person and looking for connection, looking for transformation, support and believing that every person has their inner diamond inside them. And we just need to find that diamond, polish it, and let it shine. Just help that person find that diamond inside themselves. And experiential, it's hugely experiential. That's why it's very hard for me to do this online, but I've learned through COVID, thanks to COVID, that we can actually do this process and practice also of Satir model online. Now, based on my recent research, which I finished last year, 4 years of my life I dedicated to study all articles, research on this planet about Satir. And I did the systemic literature review of 21 studies out of 13,000 of different studies available out there. And what we found out was that it's not just an anecdote or some people find it helpful, some not. No, there's scientific evidence that Satir model improves self-esteem. It reduces psychological stress. So I looked at Satir model and impact on stress, anxiety, and depression. And it does reduce depression, stress, and anxiety. It also helps increase congruence and improve communication. So my original actually coaching in NLP world was about relationships. That's where I suffered the most. I have 2 marriages and lots of failed relationships with, not failed, of course, there are steps towards the one that I currently have with my soulmate for 15 years. We have 3 amazing children and we live now in Greece, in Athens, and we travel around the world doing amazing projects for this planet. So it also, Satir model is very much in support systemic family change. So it's not like a 1-person change, but once that person changes, because of the systemic awareness, it's like a clock, a Swiss mechanism. The whole system starts shifting. And it works across culture, across genders, across sexualities. Its effectiveness is amazing. I work a lot with business people, CEOs, executive teams. We're under trees. We use systemic Satir intensive training also. And it's amazing how it works with orphanages in Siberia and how it works with CEOs in multinational companies. So you're in good company here. Now, if you look at this graph, so effectiveness of the Satir model across different areas, it's amazing that it's not just effective, it's effective above 80% and sometimes it's 90%. So, placebo is 50%. So it's much, much better than placebo. And in terms of trauma healing, stress reduction, just generally family therapy. So it can go deep. So if you have clients who have some, not just coaching challenges, but also deep family challenges, self-esteem challenges, this is an area that you invite you to look into, to study Satir, because it also, with the latest research in neuroscience, like the Steve Porges polyvagal theory, for example, now we know it's very much aligned. I'm not going to go deep into that because we're talking about NLP today, but if you want to learn more about Satir, absolutely connect with me. I'd love to share. Now, I don't know if you know, but Satir model has influenced many therapeutic approaches. Apart from NLP, obviously, it has influenced a field of emotional family therapy. So Dr. Sue Johnson was a student of Dr. Banman, who co-wrote the Satir model, this book, together with Virginia Satir. And he's one of my mentors. And so Sue Johnson, who created EFT, was her mentor, her student. IFS, if you've heard of internal family systems, the work by Richard Schwartz. Dr. Schwartz created Parts World, the internal family system. That's very connected to Virginia Satir Parts Party exercise. And again, very much shaped by Virginia. Even Richard himself, Richard Schwartz, he mentioned for my upcoming book, he said that, look, I did my doctorate on Virginia Satir and it influenced a lot of what he does. So it's also wonderful to have that connection because there's a lot of science backed up research in IFS. Family constellation, if you've heard of the work of Bert Hellinger, again, very much influenced by Virginia Satir and systemic therapy. From my trip to Aberdeen in Scotland, there were just hundreds of practitioners of systemic therapy, family therapy, that are students of Virginia Satir. Now, in terms of the scientific validation of the Satir model over time, interestingly, in the last 25 years, there's been so much more research happening to support and validate how a Bayesian Satir model is. So I really root for Satir. Now, here she is. The problem is not the problem. The coping is the problem. There are so many wonderful metaphors that Virginia Satir said in her lifetime, written in books. And again, I suggest, if you're new to Satir, my favorite book is called The New People Making. This one. It has different covers, but this book, The New People Making, okay, by Virginia Satir. It's a lovely book and very easy to read about what we think problems are, but actually they're not real problems. So John Grinder, when I studied with him, and also Richard, they both tribute these amazing meta models that they've come up with, that they saw Virginia do so brilliantly when she worked with families, how she paraphrased, how she used her language and her body, her smile, her hugs. Another one is very famous. We need 4 hugs a day to survive. We need 8 hugs a day to have a good life, or we need 12 hugs a day to thrive. So many people have heard this. If not, I love this because I'm a very kinesthetic kind of person. Now, here's kudos go to Stefania on this call because she created this amazing posters. And by the way, we can send them to you in real high quality shape and form if you connect with us later. So here's what Satir model is about versus hierarchical model. There's no good or bad. I'm not saying something is correct or not, but this is just a very different way of looking at a person, at an event, and at relationships. So let me go through this in brief. Satir looked at the goal of her process of the model is as personal growth, help create personal growth, versus in a hierarchical model, a lot of it is to create structure, processes, protocols. She was just all about self-esteem. As her role as a therapist or a coach in this NLPer, she was seeing herself as a guide versus a leader, okay, in a structural hierarchical model. Her approach was all about collaborative empowerment, like putting together a little puzzle, versus quite a directive approach in hierarchical models. And often we see that in different shapes and forms, but she was just non-directive fully, which I love about that. So a lot of open-ended questions, a lot of just sort of, okay, what do you think? She was saying, I love that. She said, you know what? We all have belly buttons. There's no hierarchy. We all have belly buttons. We're equal. I love that. You know, there's just all this hierarchical model. Oh, I know everything and you don't know, in a patriarchal kind of model. In her model, we're all the same. And core principles of her model is, again, self-esteem versus authority, congruence versus control, and communication, the center and heart, especially at the beginning, versus compliance. So communication was at the heart, at the start of her book called The Satir Approach to Communication. So if you are interested in this part, especially in Palo Alto, at the beginning of her career, she was like so interested in how people communicate, and she wrote this wonderful book. And many people know from the social work and the family therapy work, her first very famous bestseller called Congruent Family Therapy. That again is a little bit, you know, the beginning of her approach. It has shifted a lot as she progressed. But I wanted to share this for those of you who don't know Satir model. So here it is. And I love that what Stefania added here. I'm convinced that the human potential for growth is virtually unlimited. Isn't that fabulous? Please write your reflections in the chat. I would love to hear, I would like to pause. Do we have any questions? Please either raise your hand, physical hand or electronic hand. Write your questions in the chat.
We have a question in the chat. The question is, can you put here the name of the books? Maybe we can share them later.
Sure. Stephanie, are you okay as I show these books to write their names and just write them in the chat? Or we can share later, you're right, because you've got
I will share them later, yes.
Okay, perfect.
The chat.
Okay, great. Any more questions, reflections so far? This is an important one that you understand the Satir model for us to progress. You got it? Connect? Do you connect with it? Yeah, great. Okay, let's move on. So The first things first, what's interesting about Satir, she would always look at family map. Because how do I know who you are? When you come to a session with me, I want to know who came before you, what kind of relationships you had before and your parents as well, and grandparents. Often she would look at 3 generations. And as you see, there's different, zigzag is like, ooh, turbulent relationship, or dotted ones, like a bit distant, or very solid line. That's a very strong, good relationship with your family member. And she would often ask the whole history of like, okay, tell me, what were the amazing events in your life? What were the highlights? What were the superpowers of your ancestors? Who are you loyal to the most in your family of origin? From your grandparents? What's your connection with grandparents? Most often we don't know much about them. And then she would say, okay, go and research, go out and ask your parents, your uncles, aunts, because this is a super gems. It's like a fantastic resources for you to know where you're coming from. So this would be the beginning of all sessions with Virginia. She would spend a lot of time on creating that family map, understanding who was born where, when, how they connected, how they fell in love, what were the circumstances, what was the context, how did they feel towards each other, what was happening in their communication, because we're just like a little piece, that Lana at the bottom, and she's the client in this situation. It's just a little piece, like the beginning of the iceberg of the whole system, where we come from, sometimes 7 generations before us. Now, here it's a classic Satir change process. So as you know, we all go through change. And the way how we go through change, especially in the way how our congruence grows, but also productivity, is we start with the old status quo. I call it in Greece, we call it stasis. It's sort of like a space of stuckness, or like we are in this cocoon. And then some form of enriching element or foreign element disrupts our status quo. It may be we lose a job, or something becomes somebody becomes sick, or so I wake up and I realize it's not working for me, or we realize something shifts in our world, macro or micro. And what happens first? There's resistance. There's this sense of like, no, no, I'm not going anywhere. It's not happening, or no. But at some point, we go into chaos, and that's when the productivity drops. That's where actually we go into this like turbulent time of like, okay, what's going on? How can I get out of here? Sometimes it feels like forever. We are on repeat, that looping, the patterns repeat themselves. So we feel disoriented. That's chaos. And if you feel this part on the change process, Virginia was so masterful at looking at clients and coachees, right, or NLP students, and she would say, not NLP at that time, she was creating together with John and Richard, but she would work with clients and she would say, okay, that's just normal. You're in chaos stage. And just normalizing that on its own was so powerful, because at some point with practice, there would be a transforming idea. And from chaos, every person, with help, with nurturing, with support, while helping them raise their self-esteem, with practice, would go through the integration process and go to the new status quo, much better status quo than the previous one in terms of productivity, congruence, and effectiveness. But at some point in the middle, there's this turbulent time. So you can find yourself on this process every single day of your life, because we are going through change processes all the time, sometimes multiple ones at the same time. I'm guilty to that one, right? When you have kids, when you have practice, when you have clients, when you have aging parents, when you're aging, health, I mean, everything is in a process of change. Any questions on this? Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. Moving on swiftly. Another wonderful part of the Satir model, and Satir loved it and used it every single time. It's called temperature reading. Temperature reading is an exercise that you could do with your clients. And it generally starts from the very beginning, how you read the temperature of a room, or you read the temperature of the relationship, the client. You can also change it. If it's a heated one, you can cool it down. If it's a cold one, you can warm it up. So the first things, especially in conflict in couples and conflict in leadership situations at work, she and we now start with appreciations. Okay, I'm appreciative of this amazing team who put together the NLP Global Summit, and Selita here and Stefania and supporting, and of course the leadership team. I'm really appreciative, because when we give appreciations, what we do really soften the ground and opening the door for our client, for our relationship, even for ourselves. I do it also temperature reading with myself every day. It's a fantastic exercise. Second thing I share is a new information. Okay, new information. It's a little bit vulnerable thing here. We open it up something new. Oh, for those who don't know, I have a new habit, or I have a new class. I have a new thing. We do family forums in our household, and often there's just so much new that we don't have time to share. So this is an opportunity to do so. New information. Then we go into puzzles. Okay, I wonder when you said that, what did you mean? Or, I wonder what that meant for you when you just, winked or sent that message. Puzzle, something you don't understand yet and you would like to share or ask. Then fourth one is worries with recommendations. I'm worried about blah, 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 and I suggest something new. Okay, it's a fantastic framework for relationships. And you finalize with hopes and wishes, and you always say, okay, well, I hope we go on a vacation and everything's gonna be smooth. Now we're in chaos zone or stage, but I hope everything goes well from now on. Make sense? Okay, great. You were easy bunch. Okay, so next one is the iceberg metaphor. It's gonna be like your little training of Satir model, thanks to Stefania's posters. And some of them I did that in the beginning as well. So here's the iceberg metaphor, one of my favorite. The iceberg metaphor, a lot of it came into NLP as well. So Satir was looking at behavior and the coping. Remember, coping was never, problem was never a problem. Coping was a problem, the way we cope with stress, as a behavior strategy. But there's so much below the waterline. What do you feel? And the most important question here is, how do you feel about feeling this way? So if somebody tells me, you know what, I feel angry, I say, okay, how do you feel about feeling angry? Well, actually, I feel shameful, or I feel guilty about feeling angry. Okay, now we're talking and we're going deeper. See, that's such a beautiful gateway into learning about perceptions. How do I see the event? The territory is a map is not a territory, right? Expectations. What do I expect from this person? What beliefs do I have? Then what values? Yearnings. And here we go. Self. Self is that self reservoir, that divinity, that energy that we want to connect to, that coach container that our lovely Judy Delosier talks about, is that when we feel centered, open, connected, when we are in alignment with our higher version. So Satir model is very much spiritual model, because this whole congruency is not just about alignment of communication, but it's also dropping into the heart and the depth of who we really are, that sense of self. Okay, moving swiftly. Another piece that is very important in Satir world is work in triads. And we're going to do an exercise today, working in triads. And Satir was looking at every person as a combination of the egg and sperm. Okay, even in our different variations of gender these days, still, for a baby to be born, we need an egg and a sperm. Two eggs cannot make babies, and two sperms cannot make babies. So in every relationship structure, we're looking at mama, papa, child. Okay, if there's a conflict, if there is, if we want collaboration, if we want to move forward in a coaching, an NLP way, sort of like process, we look at a triad, and it's a very systemic way of looking and working in triads in all our trainings. And when we work in support systems, there's always that third person, because they give that depth, that dynamic, that sense of support, but also an element of where we come from. We come from families where there was an egg and a sperm. Even when parents are missing, even I work with adopted parents or children who are grown into parents, but they were adopted, for example, or fostered. And I will tell you how in a bit.